Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Foresight TV. I have got Dwayne Clark, the CEO of Aegis, living with me today. You have built one of the most amazing, admired companies, senior living companies in the country. But recently, he found himself in the crosshairs of this very critical article published by The Stranger, a Seattle magazine, and it was unfair. I wish, Dwayne, I'm a little jealous of Joe Rogan right now because I have so many questions I'd like to ask that I wish I could go for 2 to 4 hours. We don't have that much time, so we're going to hit the highlights. And before we get started, this. Hey guys, Steve Moran here. Okay, so I want to start with this question. When you first read that article, what was your gut reaction?
Well, I think my gut reaction is this is not journalism. This is a brochure for the unions. It was so poorly written. There was basically no fact finding. There was no journalistic integrity. I have a couple of friends who own large newspapers, and I had them read it, and they chuckled and said, this is not a journalist. This is somebody that's being given a job to give a paid advertisement. And so, there were so many things that were just filled with first of all, lies and poor journalistic integrity. Like, my first job was in the criminal justice system. And they said, well, there's no record of that. Well, when I printed my rebuttal, it took 5 seconds to, reach out to the head of HR and say, yes, he did. So, but there was just so many things, Steve, that it's almost laughable that, the unions who, as we'll get into, actually have bought several papers and are using these small papers to get their message across.
So it feels to me like, this is a really good example of it, but it feels to me like there's some desperation with the unions and they're willing to go to, new or different or more, maybe perhaps more sophisticated attacks than in the past.
Well, I think anyone who has history with the unions will say this is not new or different tactics. It may be more innovative for them. But, if you go on ChatGPT or Google or whatever and just say, give me a list of union lawsuits or union, grievances that people have had with SEIU. From forgery to bullying to intimidation to there's a lawsuit where they sign people's cards without the people's permission, their union cards, failing to report, donations that came in, members who've opted out of the unions, but they won't let them opt out of the union. It's fraught with litigation and lawsuits against these guys. They're bullies. And, they're 2 million members strong. They have $62 million in their bank account. And they want to call other people rich, and when they don't get their way, they kind of resort to harassment and bullying techniques.
So we, as you know, probably a year, maybe a little bit more ago, Silverado was involved in this egregious criminal complaint of a manslaughter murder complaint. And it was interesting to me that they picked probably one of the very best memory care companies that's more conscientious than just about any other memory care company in the country to go after. And as you know, after spending hundreds of thousands of dollars, they were completely, they made it clear that it was just a baseless thing. And it's fascinating to me because I'd actually like to talk a little bit about your philosophy. I feel like this is the same kind of thing. You're one of the leaders out there that is really focused on creating great work experiences for residents, great work experiences for team members, great experiences for families. And I'd like to have you just talk a little bit about your operating philosophy.
Yeah. Well, we just, I think it was 4 days ago, celebrated our 28th anniversary. So, we've been doing it a long time. This is the start of my 40th year in senior housing. So I'm not new to this industry. I'm not new to things that go on in this industry. But when I started this company 28 years ago, the underlying tenets of this company was to be an employee first company. And we've done that. We have third party objective criteria that have outlined that. We were the first company in healthcare, not in assisted living, not senior housing, but in healthcare to ever make the Glassdoor top 50. Our Glassdoor score today is 4.2, ascending to 4.3 right now. I just checked it yesterday, which is the highest in senior housing. Seniorly just voted our Greenwood property as the #1 property in the United States. We just made the Newsweek top 1,000 companies in America for families and parents. So, we've won endless awards. Our net promoter score is the same as Disney and Ritz-Carlton. So we've always put a huge emphasis on our employees because that's the touch point. That's the person that touches the resident and creates the experience. And if they're not happy, the resident experience is not going to be happy. So, we've always focused on that. And so we kind of got surprised by the union, just thinking, hey, we're a great company. We do great things with our employees. What we've learned from our attorneys and talking to many people who've been involved in union activities is that it's often the best companies that get targeted because the union feels like, oh, if we can get the best company to do it, the lesser companies are going to fall in line, right? And so I just give you an example of CEOs that I know in Seattle. Amazon targeted, Nordstrom was targeted, Costco's been targeted, REI. You can go on and on and on about the companies that have been targeted by unions and why. This is because they're the best in class. When you're the best in class, the union's philosophy is if we can take these down, we'll have others follow. So, and the whole thing, I should just clarify for your audience, we only have 1 out of 39 buildings that voted for a union. We're not talking about Aegis as a company. We're talking about 1, and we have no contract after 2.5 years. And what may be of interest to people, because I wish somebody would have told me this 3 years ago, is how this happened, because it's a very interesting story. Our building that voted for the union is Aegis of Ravenna, and we got notice that there would be a union vote, which kind of surprised us again because we think we do a great job with our employees. And so what we found out, and I didn't know any of the ways that the union did business, but they'd sent in what's called a SALT. And a SALT is a person that's hired by the union to go into your building, pose as an employee of your company, and rally the staff to join the union by making false claims about, hey, we can get you $10 more an hour if you sign this card, and so on and so forth. Be easy, you can do it in a couple months, you'll have more money. And these SALTs, these SALTs are paid a substantial bonus, sometimes tens of thousands of dollars, if they unionize the building, right? So we became aware of this SALT activity in our building. So we polled our staff. We had about, don't quote me on this number, but I think it was about 88 staff that were eligible to vote. So we felt pretty confident. We polled. We thought we're gonna win this. And so a day or two before the actual vote, the union sent a message, an appeal to the National Labor Relations Board, who at that time were democratically involved. And, if you have any knowledge of the National Labor Relations Board, it's the head of it is politically appointed. So if it's a Democrat, it's more liberal towards labor. If it's a Republican, it's more conservative. Yep. So it was Biden appointed a Democratic, person to head the National Labor Relations Board. And they appealed to say, well, we can't vote at the building, which is commonplace, because they have COVID in the building, which is an absurd thing because we're a healthcare center. These people come every day to take care of these people with COVID. What's different about them coming the day that they go to work and voting, right? So the National Labor Relations Board agreed with them and said, okay, you can do remote votes. Well, of course, the union, made sure that their remote voting people had all the appropriate information and technology to vote appropriately. And instead of having, 88 people vote, we ended up having like 50 people vote. And so some, 35, 40 people who probably would have been in our favor didn't get a chance to come to their place of work and vote. We lost by a handful of votes. I think, 9 votes that voted for them would have voted for us. We would have won the election. So that was 2.5 years ago. We've been in negotiations for 2.5 years. We have no contract. And now all the people that voted, whatever it was, 30 people or whatever the number was that voted for the union, have since left the building. And so when the unions have a picket, we're like, well, we don't recognize these people that are picketing our building because they're not our employees. They go and hire, other people or bring people from other jobs to picket. They're not even our employees now. We just did our employee survey, and we asked all kinds of questions because we want not only the flattery and the good news, but we want to know the bad news, well, how we can shape your life better. We had over 2,600 comments from our employees. Do you know how many were in favor of the union? 4. We had 4 comments out of 2,600. So, unions have 4 methods of getting you to sign the document, right? So, they can picket, right? Which if your own employee is not picketing, it's not very functional. They can go on strike. Our employees have refused to go on strike. They can file with the National Labor Relations Board an appeal. Well, the National Labor Relations Board now is pretty much defunct because Trump appointed a Republican as the head of it. And there's only 2 members now, so they cancel each other out. So there's no, it's a defunct board. And the 4th thing they can do is intimidation. And believe me, they're leaning heavily into the intimidation factor. And I can give some examples of that if you want.
So have they, man, I've got so many questions here. I'm going to, so how do I keep this? I guess my first question is if I'm looking at this as an operator, I'm thinking, oh my God, how do I make sure I don't have one of those people show up inside my building and start agitating for change? Do you have any thoughts on how to keep that from happening?
Well, you have to screen people, right? But you can't,
right.
you can't say, are you a union member? Are you pro-union? That's illegal. So, you just have to make sure that you're doing a good job with your employees. That's the essence of this. If your employees love you, they're not going to turn union. And in fact, the unions tried to get into a second building of ours. They lost the vote. They appealed that vote to do it a second time at that same building. And the night before, they called us and they said, we've decided not to vote. Well, you know what that means. When you decide not to vote, it means they polled the people and they don't have enough votes and they didn't want 2 denial votes on their record. So that was the case. And, that's the issue with the union. It's like they're trying to get people to enforce their membership, to have more members, to have more dues. The irony thing about this is, I've talked to a few of the members. I even went out and delivered coffee and donuts to some people that were picketing for me. And my staff was holding their breath and, oh my God, what's he going to say? And I was very civil. I said, hey, it's cold out here. Let me give you some coffee. You give me something to eat. And they're like, do you believe in the union? I go, what's a funny thing here? When I got out of college, I worked for the state of Washington. I was the union representative. And I said, I was liberal minded. I wanted the best for my colleagues. I was 20-something year old. I was a little bit naive. And I was negotiating with people in Olympia for, a new contract. And I said, after about 1.5 years, I became terribly disillusioned with what I was doing here. This wasn't about the employees, it was about dues and membership and lobbying power. And, it wasn't because I would bring, issues to the union. They're like, oh yeah, we can't deal with that. So, the funny thing is, I've seen it from both sides as a person who's advocated the union, as a person who owns a company that the union's tried to get into. And, we look at evaluations of people from a different perspective. If you go and look at the union's Glassdoor score, I just challenge anyone that's listening on this call to just Google, SEIU Glassdoor score, it's like 2.3, 2.4. It's horrible. And read the comments. They're horrible, right? So it's like, if I really care about my staff, would I want these people to be taking care of them? But it's not my decision. At the end of the day, it's not for me to vote yes or no. All I can do is negotiate in good faith, which we have been doing. It's up to the employees, and if they don't want them, they don't want them.
So let's assume that an employee comes to you and says, Dwayne, I love working for Aegis. I love my job. I love my residents. But man, the union's promising me more wages, better benefits. And so I'm still thinking about joining them. And I don't want you to take it personally. How would you respond to them? What do you tell them?
Well, first of all, I think you have to look around and just have a basic business understanding, right? So if somebody's promising you $7 more an hour, the first thing you're going to ask that employee is, well, where does that money come from? And everybody thinks there's a magic owner's ATM machine in the sky where that money comes from, and it just magically pay you $7 an hour. And you have to explain them, this then is a cost of doing business. That, $1 an hour, depending on the size of the building and a variety of factors, interest rates, everything else, could mean as much as $300 or $400 a month to a resident. So, you're going to give a person a $2,000 a month raise to offset that $7? No way. The second thing I would tell them is, we want to pay you a market competitive wage. So here's, we do this every year. Here's what our 7 competitors are doing. Here's what they're paying. Here's what they're paying. Here's where they're paying. We're not the lowest, and we're certainly maybe not the highest, but we're middle to above average in terms of what we pay. But the biggest thing I would tell people is that, I came from very humble beginnings. I worked as a dishwasher. I worked on the road crew. I did yard maintenance, all these things, going to college and high school and everything else, even in my young years. I was a janitor in a bank. You don't have to look at this as this is the end all be all. This is not the end of your life, right? This is not the end of your job life. And so we have a program called Elevate. We have, I think right now, 1, 2, 3, I think there's 7 or more, could be as many as 10 general managers who started out in a line position, making a line staff wage, that are making $175,000 to $250,000 a year. So, we want you to rise through the ranks. We want those people. Our homegrown people are our best people. And so, I tell a story of a young man named Peter Koshy. Peter came to me. He got Employee of the Quarter, and he said, well, all I want is to have lunch with Dwayne. So, this is, I want to say 17, 18 years ago. So I take him to lunch. And it's like, I'm going to be the best GM you have ever had. I'm like, Peter, you're 16. You're washing dishes part-time in high school. He goes, well, what do I need to do to do that? And I go, well, you got to go to college. You got to get this kind of degree. Here's the steps in the company. He's now 33, 34 years old, one of our best GMs. And, he's married. He's got a family. He's got a great life, right? So that's the example that I want to give. We had another woman who just retired last month. Her name was Griselda. She was our most successful GM, probably from a financial standpoint, in the history of the company. She came to us 26 years ago and didn't speak English. And she only came because her daughter got a $20 bonus if she filled out an application. And she's like, I don't speak English. So we sent her to English as a second language. We taught her. She went up to the ranks, and she became a phenomenal GM. So we want to see the best in people. We want to see them rise up. You're not going to be a care manager for life. And we're a company that really believes in training and sending our people to school and helping them become the best of the best.
So I want to dig a little bit deeper into your so first I want to stop and say, I just, if I were young and starting out, I've got Jada who's producing, who you met Dwayne before, and we don't see on Friday. I'm sitting here thinking, oh my God, she's going to want to go to work for you and leave me, so she can make that kind of money and have that kind of career progression. I mean, you never know, right? But anyway, the article was very personal, and it attacked very directly some areas that you're really passionate about, your cafe and some of those things. Can you talk about some of the other things besides the employment that they just completely got wrong?
Well, like they said, we have a foundation called the Potato Soup Foundation. And we started the Potato Soup Foundation very, very early in the history of the company. I want to say, maybe 3 years, 25 years ago, 3 years into the company being born. And the reason that was so important to me is because, as I've said before, I grew up in a very poor family. My mom was a line cook. There was a time where we didn't have enough money to eat, and we lived for 8 or 9 days off stolen potatoes and some cream and butter and onions we had in the fridge, and we made potato soup for 8 or 9 days and lived off that. And I just never wanted that. I never wanted that life for an employee of mine. So we formed the Potato Soup Foundation. And it's funded all kinds of people, from victims of domestic violence to people that have to have emergency dental surgery. We've paid for employees' parents to be buried in foreign countries. I mean, just everything. Domestic violence issues. I mean, on and on and on and on and on. And every month we award several awards. And the article said, well, the employees pay for this. It's not Mr. Clark or anyone else that pay for this, which is partially true, but it's really misstated. The fund was funded by myself and my then partner, Bill Gallagher. We goosed the fund and put in several thousands of dollars personally to that. But what I wanted to do is I wanted to create a culture of community, right? And so I encourage people, even if it's 50 cents a paycheck, to give to the Potato Soup Foundation. It's not like these people are giving, tens of thousands of dollars. It may mean, hey, I'm giving you 50 cents a paycheck or $1 a paycheck. And why is that important? Because I want them to know we're a family. I want them to know we help each other, right? And I want them to be proud and say, hey, I gave $12 to the Potato Soup Foundation last year. I don't care if it's $12 or $5 or whatever. I want the fact that we take care of each other to be known. And so, today, I don't know what the exact number is, but it's around 700 or 800 people that contribute to the Potato Soup Foundation. And we give dozens of grants every year to these people. So, that's something that happened that was just totally misstated and it was misinformed. They said that I've never given to any charities but high-end schools. That is the biggest crock of baloney. I mean, and again, it's easily, as I said in my rebuttal, found on a tax form. When COVID happened, we started the Seattle Senior Strong Foundation. I started it, got a few of my friends to pitch in. We raised, I don't know, $400,000 or $500,000 for seniors who couldn't get out of their houses. That because of COVID, they couldn't go to the pharmacy. So we helped pay for pharmacy bills or necessities for these people, and we delivered it to them. They failed to mention that. I have a foundation called D1 that supports kids of color who are athletes. So we teach them things like finance and social media skills and real estate and interest rates and, how to be a good husband and so on. Given hundreds of thousands of dollars to that. I've worked with the Vatican, given hundreds of thousands of dollars to the Vatican to end child sex slavery. But I don't talk about these things because it's inappropriate to. You sound like you're bragging if you do these things. Aegis has given a 7-figure donation to the homeless issue in Seattle. I mean, so we could go on and on and on about this, but we are an incredibly responsible business in terms of having a community responsibility. And for them to say, oh, he just gives to high-end schools is just is baloney. I mean, we have a restaurant cafes called the Queen Bee, and we take no money from those Queen Bee. It all goes to charity. All the money that's raised in the cafes go to charity. These are separate entities. So we're constantly looking for giving money to the Alzheimer's associations. My mother died of Parkinson's. We're big supporters of Parkinson's, cancer, American Heart Association. So again, just poor journalism and an absolute misstated lie.
So how do I'm a senior living operator, or I'm looking at what happened to you. How do I, as an operator, how do I create a defensive moat to reduce the likelihood this will happen to me?
Well, I'm going to answer that a little bit different way, Steve. I think when something like this happens to you, you really finds out who your friends are, and you find out who's not operating in the most ethical way. To be honest, we had a couple competitors who weaponized this against us to, to get move-ins and to downgrade us, and was waving the articles in front of prospective residents' faces. We noted that. We'll remember that. We'll never forget that. So we know who those people are. So it's called those people out. But I think what's been refreshing for me is the number of people, some of which I've never met in my life, that have reached out to me. Over 300 responses from competitors, from family members, from various people in the industry, vendors, employees that I fired, positive, great, messages of reinforcement, of love, people sending cards and flowers and notes. And, I think that's what gets you through this. At the end of the day, first of all, it's things like this. Asha's doing one with our attorney later this month. But it's forums like this, and thank you, Steve, for doing this, because I think, we talk about the threats that we have out there, but this is a threat that I think 4 or 5 years ago we would have never foreseen. And the reality of the situation is that their motto is, if we can't get you to join, we're going to try to cancel you as a company. And, again, I have rhino skin. My first job out of college was in a maximum security prison. So I'm used to working around bad people. And so, there's not much you can do that's going to hurt me personally or offend me. I think I may have shared with you, I got an award at the McKnight's for Lifetime Achievement Award in Chicago. And although I was the keynote speaker, there was 30 or 40 other people, the care manager of the year, the Alzheimer's coordinator of the year, the cook of the year. I mean, all these line staff, right? That would be union prospects. The union sent in 3 people to disrupt the meeting, the celebration. And they stood up in the audience and made speeches and screamed and shouted and had to be carried out by security. And if you look at that, I mean, they think they were hurting me. What really happened is they kind of got laughed out of the room. And the people like the care manager said, now after seeing that, I will never vote for a union in my life. Those people are just disrespectful, mean, and rude. And, they ruined it for these line staff who would be potential members for them, right? So they essentially, let me give you another example. We do an event every year called Winterfest. We've done it for over 20 years. And, the holidays has a special meaning to me growing up as a little boy and so on. So we try to make it special for our staff. So we turn our corporate office into a retail store. And we give away food, we give away money, we have all kinds of toys that we work all year long to assimilate. We give away warm clothing and gift certificates and so on. We have about 800 people that come through our office in about 8 hours. Wow. I mean, it looks like a Sunday at Costco outside our office. People, sometimes we'll have 100 people line up by the time we open the doors at 9 in the morning. And so, we come through, it's all very orderly. Well, the union decided they would disrupt this. So they dressed up as Grinches. They hired, 10 picketers to come, and they had microphones. And again, these are people bringing their families to this. And little kids were crying. They were terrified. And these people are like, that's it. That did it for me. These people made my 3-year-old cry. I will never in my life vote for a union again. And I'm going to tell every person I know who these people are, right? They don't think about this. They're bullies. They're kind of like schoolyard bullies that just say, hey, we're going to go intimidate them. But they don't realize the collateral damage that, at the Chicago Awards banquet, how they ruin constituents for life. How at the Winterfest, they ruin constituents for life, right? So, what's the best advice? Well, you got to go listen to forums like this. You got to be informed. You got to listen to your employees. You got to educate them. You got to tell them these people may not be the most honest people in the world. By the way, don't believe me. Go on and read their reviews and what other past union members have found them doing: bullying, intimidation, coming to their house, strong arming them. And then you find out for yourself. Again, don't believe Dwayne Clark. Just go on and do your own research. And then you can come up with your own conclusion. That's what I would tell them.
Right. I have one more question. We're about out of time, but one of the things that I have great admiration that you did is that, as you know, we see a lot, way more than we'd like, negative press about senior living organizations. And frankly, one of the things that I see most operators do is just ignore it. And instead of ignoring it, you went head on, you tackled it, you wrote a letter. Did they ever acknowledge your response, by the way?
The unions?
Yeah. Well, the stranger.
Oh, no, absolutely not.
Yeah. So how did you make the decision that the right thing was to, if you will, fight back?
Well, I think it has to do with more than Aegis, right? And more than Dwayne Clark. I think there's ironically, an hour after I wrote that rebuttal, the Seattle Times came out with an article that said that the stranger was owned by the union and that the unions were buying up these newspapers, and it's not credible journalism. And so, it proved what we were saying all along. I think when something like this happens, first of all, you can't do knee-jerk reactions like, well, I'm going to go after them or I'm going to write something. So we waited 2 or 3 weeks to gather data. We said, let's gather data. Let's try to reach out to them. And we tried to reach out to this owner of the stranger. And he's like, well, I don't really deal with this anymore. So we tried to have a conversation with him. He blew us off. By the way, he's an ex-Democratic legislator. And so, we tried to have a conversation civilly with them. No one wanted to have that conversation. And it's not the stranger article that was a big deal, because hardly anyone in Seattle reads the strangers. But what they did is they printed the article back on Facebook, on Reddit, on Instagram, and sent it out, 1,000 times. I think after the Seattle Times article came out, that really took the air out of their sails. But what I wanted to do is I can't stand bullies. And, once you attack me, I'm fine with that. When you start attacking my staff, or they started going after my family, that's crossing the line. They were emailing my minor grandchildren. So, they have no ethics about how they perceive, these things. And it's, again, I think you have to stand up to bullies in life, and it was the right thing to do. But we waited 3 or 4 weeks before we wrote that letter. And we wanted to have all our facts so someone could have said, well, your facts are wrong or whatever. No, they were spot on. And they were 100% in journalistic integrity when we wrote that letter.
Well, and I will tell you that to me, one of the biggest in post the publication, one of the biggest indictments of them is the fact that they have not acknowledged your response to that, which would, again, be good journalism, right? But it was just a hit piece. Well, thank you, Dwayne. I appreciate it. We're out of time.
All right, Steve.
Great conversation. Big hero, big fan of what you're doing from a culture standpoint and your response to this. So I appreciate your commitment to making the world of senior living better for residents and for team members.
My pleasure. Thank you, Steve.